JeevaKarunya discipline by Chidambaram Ramalingam. JeevakaRunya is considered the foremost practice in the Suddha Sanmarga. It is the essential foundation upon which genuine spiritual transformation is built. Ramalinga emphasized this discipline as the key to receiving the grace of vast grace light and attaining eternal life. It is widely known that Ramalinga wrote and preached the discipline of JeevakaRunya in magnificent detail, originally intending for it to be presented in 7 distinct parts. However, only the first 2 parts and half of the third part are available to the world today. We present this translation with deep reverence and an honest acknowledgement of its challenges. The original Tamil text is rich with nuanced spiritual terminology and cultural context, which can be immensely difficult to capture fully in another language. Although achieving a perfect rendition is an arduous task, we have tried our best to ensure a faithful and accurate translation of the Master's words, striving to preserve the depth and power of his original message. May these words guide you to compassionate truth and divine grace. JeevakaRunya. Part 1. Those who have attained human birth in this world, while there is still time, must realize and attain the soul gain that is achievable through this birth. If one is to know what is that soul gain, one must truly know that the gain attainable by the soul through this human birth is the unparalleled great life of eternal, unobstructed, inherent bliss realized through the direct experience of the full natural bliss of God. God is the very form of natural reality, the source from which all worlds, all realms, all objects, all beings, all disciplines, and all blessings arise, shine, and are illumined by his power of grace, which is his own full natural manifestation. This eternal great life is lived without any hindrance whatsoever, at any time, in any place, and in any manner. This is the true gain of the soul that can indeed be attained through this human birth. This should be understood as the truth. If one is to know, by what means can one attain that great life of eternal, unobstructed, inherent bliss? One must know that it can be attained only through the grace, which is the natural manifestation of God. If one is to know, by what means can one obtain that grace, the natural manifestation of God? One must certainly know that the grace of God can be obtained only through the discipline of JeevakaRunya, compassion towards living beings, and by no other means whatsoever can it be obtained even slightly. If one asks, how is it that the grace of God can be obtained only through the discipline of JeevakaRunya and by no other means? Grace means God's compassion, and it is God's natural manifestation. JeevakaRunya means the Jeevs, living beings, compassion, and it is the natural manifestation of the souls of living beings. For this reason, it is possible to attain compassion by means of compassion and to attain manifestation by means of manifestation. That is, to attain the grace, God's compassion, by means of JeevakaRunya, Jeev's compassion, to attain God's natural manifestation, grace, by means of the natural manifestation of souls of living beings, JeevakaRunya. Since it is an experienced truth that it cannot be attained by anything else, it is certain that one can attain grace by means of compassion for living beings, and by absolutely no other means. One must know that no further proof is needed for this, since JeevakaRunya is the only path to obtain grace. The path of wisdom and the good path are known to be the discipline of JeevakaRunya. The path of ignorance and the evil path are known to be the absence of the discipline of JeevakaRunya. When JeevakaRunya shines forth, wisdom and love will stand and shine forth together. Because of that, the power to do good will manifest, and through that power to do good, all benefits will arise. When JeevakaRunya disappears, wisdom and love will simultaneously disappear. Because of that, the power to do good will disappear. When the power to do good disappears, all evils will arise. Therefore, it is known that virtue is JeevakaRunya alone, and sin is the absence of JeevakaRunya alone. One must truly know that the manifestation that comes through the discipline of JeevakaRunya is God's manifestation. The bliss that comes through the discipline of JeevakaRunya is God's bliss. The realized souls who have seen and experienced this manifestation and this bliss many times and have attained completeness are those liberated while living, and that they alone will know God by their wisdom and become one with God. But what is meant by the discipline of JeevakaRunya? One must know that it is to live one's life by worshipping God through the soul-melting compassion that arises among living beings concerning other living beings. When does soul-melting compassion arise towards living beings? One must know that this soul-melting compassion arises when one either sees living beings experiencing suffering due to hunger, thirst, disease, desire, helplessness, fear, or killing, or hears of them experiencing such suffering, or comes to know that such suffering will occur. What is the fundamental basis for the emergence of Jeevakarunya? Since all living beings, Jeevs, have been created by the all-powerful God as fractional parts of one single essential nature, they are all siblings possessing equal rights. Just as compassion arises in one sibling who sees or knows that another sibling is suffering from a calamity, the compassion arising in one Jeev upon seeing or knowing that another Jeev is suffering is known as the ancient soul right/relation, soul fraternal right. When people see others suffering, some remain hard-hearted without Jeevakarunya. Why do they lack this soul right? The soul wisdom, the eye that ought to recognize the sufferer as a sibling, and know that they are suffering or will suffer, is greatly dimmed by the veil of ignorance. Additionally, the aiding instruments, such as the mind and other senses, which serve as the glasses for this eye, are thick and lack the power to reflect light. Therefore, they are unable to see and know. This is why Jeevakarunya does not arise, even though the fraternal right exists. This shows that a person with Jeevakarunya is one who possesses soul vision and clarity. The suffering that comes to living beings from hunger, thirst, fear, etc., are experiences of the mind, eyes, and other instruments, not experiences of the soul. If so, is there not a special benefit in practicing Jeevakarunya? In this physical body, everything besides the soul and the natural manifestation of God, which is the knowledge for the knowledge of the soul, are inert fundamental elements that serve as tools, not conscious entities. Therefore, inert things cannot experience pleasure and pain. Just as one cannot say the clay rejoiced or was sorrowful, one cannot say the mind rejoiced or was sorrowful. The body, built by God using the mind and other instruments for the Jeev's life, is a small house, just as one builds a house with clay for physical living. The one residing in the house experiences pleasure and pain. The house itself does not. Furthermore, when the eyes whose vision is blurred and look through the glass and see something sorrowful, the eyes will shed tears, but the glasses will not. Therefore, one must know that the mind and other instruments that serve as glasses for the soul vision do not experience pleasure and pain. The soul alone experiences them. When a living being experiences happiness, the mind rejoices. When sorrow occurs, the mind is discouraged. Does this not mean the mind experiences pleasure and pain? No, it does not. Just as the luster and fatigue of the house owner's body, who is inside a house made of crystal, are reflected and appear on the crystal house, and just as the brightness and weariness of the eyes are reflected on the glasses worn over them, the happiness and weariness that arise in the soul due to pleasure and pain are merely reflected and appear outwardly in the mind and other instruments. Therefore, it must be understood that pleasure and pain are experienced by the soul alone, and that the instruments are merely aiding tools for the soul to know and experience pleasure and pain. Why do many living beings created by God suffer immensely from hunger, thirst, fear, etc.? One must know that they are living beings who, in their previous births, did not desire the discipline of Jeevakarunya, but became hard-hearted and followed the evil path. Therefore, they suffer immensely from hunger, thirst, fear, etc., according to the decree of God's grace. How do we know that a previous body exists? Just as one concludes that a householder who has rented a new house for residence must have previously rented and lived in another house, for he could not have lived without a house, and that if a dispute arises in the current house, he will move to another house. Similarly, one must determine that the soul, which has come to reside in this body by paying the rental fee of food, must have previously lived in another body by paying that fee, for it could not have lived without a body. And if a dispute arises in this body, it will move and reside in another body. Therefore, one must know that the soul has bodies both before and after the current one. How is it that the sins committed by the soul in a previous body carry over to this current body? Consider a householder, tenant, who, while living in a previous house, failed to follow the commands of his master, landlord. Instead, he invited evil people and associated with them. Even when that householder leaves that house and comes to reside in a new house, those evil people will come to this new house as well and continue their association. Similarly, if a soul, while residing in its previous body, did not follow the command of God but willingly committed sinful actions through the evil path, then when that soul comes into a different body, those sinful actions will also come and attach themselves to the soul in this current body. If it is the decree of God's grace that living beings who abandon the discipline of Jeevakarunya in a former birth and follow the evil path are made to suffer from hunger, thirst, fear, etc., in this birth, then would it not be a violation of the divine rule of grace to show compassion to those beings by giving them food and other necessities, and thereby alleviating their suffering? The answer is it would not be a violation. The king feeds even great criminals who are completely opposed to his commands and are confined in prison with fetters on their legs, by sending his servants to deliver food. Similarly, God provides food even to the sinners who are fully opposed to his command and are bound by various means and reside in hell, by sending his subordinate deities. The king banishes ordinary offenders who did not follow his command but committed minor faults from their positions, preventing them from enjoying the benefits they would normally receive. He makes them wander in different places so that they may gain wisdom. When these officials, having lost their posts, wander in the outskirts of villages, deprived of luxury and comforts, suffering due to lack of food, compassionate people see their distress and give them food and other necessities. When the king hears or sees this, he is pleased and honors those who gave the aid, calling them kind and compassionate householders. He does not get angry. Similarly, God removes ordinary offenders who did not follow his command from the comfortable celestial realms they were entitled to, preventing them from gaining expected comforts using his power. He casts them into different bodies so they may gain wisdom. When these Jeevs, having lost their comforts, suffer in various places without food, and compassionate people see their distress and give them food, God will be pleased and honor those who gave the aid, wishing them increasing prosperity. He will not get angry. Therefore, you must truly know that it is the accepted will of the divine rule of God's grace that living beings should show compassion toward other living beings. By this Jeevakarunya, the worldly discipline prevails. If there is no Jeevakarunya, the worldly discipline will not prevail at all. How is this so? When there is no Jeevakarunya, knowledge and love will not appear. When they do not appear, kindness, unity, and benefaction will not manifest. When these qualities do not manifest, the order and discipline of the weak living beings will be hindered and destroyed by the strong living beings due to jealousy and other vices. Subsequently, the discipline of the strong living beings will also become tamasa, characterized by ignorance and inertia, and the discipline of one person will be destroyed by conflict when the discipline of another person collapses due to arrogance. Just as worldly order does not prevail at all in a jungle inhabited by animals like tigers and lions, which have no trace of the discipline of Jeevakarunya, you must likewise understand that worldly order will not prevail at all in places inhabited by humans who lack Jeevakarunya. The transcendental discipline also prevails through Jeevakarunya. If it is absent, the transcendental discipline will not prevail. How is this so? One must know that when Jeevakarunya is absent, the manifestation of divine grace will not appear. When that does not appear, the state of God will not be attained. When that is not attained, no one will reach the bliss of liberation. In the absence of reaching it, the transcendental discipline will not prevail at all. Since the discipline of Jeevakarunya is not widely prevalent, the birth of evil proliferating, and vile conducts are prevailing everywhere. How is this so? All the hard-hearted individuals who lack compassion for living beings are born according to their hard deeds as various beings, including inhabitants of hell, inhabitants of the ocean, inhabitants of the forest, ferocious animals like the tiger, bear, lion, yali, elephant, buffalo, ram, pig, dog, cat, etc. Poisonous creatures like the snake and scorpion, fierce creatures like the crocodile and shark, vile birds like the crow and eagle, impure plants like strychnine tree and cactus. Therefore, one must understand that vile and base conducts are greatly prevalent, as these lower forms of life embody such conduct. One must understand that Jeevakarunya is not only the chief means for attaining God's grace, but it is also a partial manifestation of that grace. Furthermore, since Jeevakarunya is the natural manifestation of the souls, God's manifestation will absolutely not appear, neither internally nor externally to those living beings who lack that natural manifestation. What is the essential objective of JeevaKarunya? All souls are parts of the natural reality and serve as the places of harmonious relation for the grace, which is the intelligence of intelligence, to manifest. Physical bodies are necessary for these souls to become living entities and develop. If the souls do not develop as living entities in these bodies, the soul's manifestation will be obscured, and consequently, the manifestation of grace will not appear. When this happens, ignorance arises, which becomes the bondage for the souls. Therefore, the physical body is absolutely necessary. Since illusion is the primary cause for physical bodies, these bodies are constantly exposed to dangers caused by the deceptive webs of Maya, such as hunger, thirst, disease, desire, helplessness, fear, and killing. Divine grace has granted living beings the power and freedom to exercise extreme vigilance, use their acquired knowledge, and utilize the assistance of the senses and instruments to prevent these dangers from occurring. Living beings should strive to use this freedom to remove these dangers from their bodies and attain the gain of the soul. The main objective lies in helping those who suffer due to the inherent dangers. It is incumbent upon us to alleviate the suffering of those living beings who are unable to relieve the dangers of hunger, thirst, disease, desire, helplessness, fear, and killing due to fate or carelessness. There are two types of JeevaKarunya based on the suffering alleviated. Apara JeevaKarunya, lesser compassion. Alleviating suffering by removing dangers other than the suffering caused by hunger and killing is apara JeevaKarunya. This only creates a little worldly pleasure. Para JeevaKarunya, supreme compassion. Alleviating the suffering caused by hunger and killing is para JeevaKarunya. This is the means by which one attains worldly pleasures, measureless miraculous pleasures, and the eternal imperishable bliss of liberation through grace. God has decreed in the scripture that those who have the free will and wisdom to alleviate dangers caused by fate or carelessness to other jeevas but deceive and fail to do so, will not be granted the freedom through grace to experience the bliss of liberation along with their worldly pleasures, and will even lose the freedom they currently enjoy in their present realms. Therefore, the essential objective of JeevaKarunya is for those jeevas who possess the necessary knowledge and freedom to kindly alleviate the dangers of hunger and killing which arise from fate or carelessness in those who lack the ability to relieve themselves, without deception. The highest benefit is attained by truly believing in this, alleviating the hunger of famished beings with food, and removing the threat of killing through appropriate action, thereby generating the bliss of contentment. Why is it stated here that alleviating the dangers of hunger and killing alone is considered special, when the duty is to alleviate dangers arising from hunger, killing, thirst, disease, desire, helplessness, and fear? The reason that alleviating the dangers of hunger and killing is singled out as special, even though removing the dangers of hunger, killing, disease, thirst, helplessness, fear, and desire are all mandatory, is explained through the concept of the two types of compassion. Apara JeevaKarunya. This refers to compassion focused on alleviating suffering from thirst, disease, desire, helplessness, and fear. Para JeevaKarunya. This refers to compassion focused on alleviating the suffering caused by hunger and killing. Since para JeevaKarunya, that is alleviating hunger and preventing killing, is the superior form of compassion, it is specifically highlighted. Thirst. Those who are compassionate enough to alleviate the hunger of suffering jeevas will not fail to give water to quench their thirst. Giving water is not difficult, and water is available in lakes, ponds, and canals. Thirst causes only a partial danger that can be easily remedied and does not result in the destruction of the body. Hunger, however, causes harm to the body that is difficult to remedy. Disease. A compassionate person who alleviates suffering due to hunger will certainly have compassion to alleviate suffering due to disease. Diseases primarily worsen due to excessive hunger, and they are cured by proper food. Even when other medicines are given, regulated food is the essential support for the body to survive. One can keep the body alive with a disease for a long time, but one cannot keep the body alive without food, even for a single day. Desire. A compassionate person who alleviates hunger with food will certainly have compassion to alleviate the suffering caused by desires. If a jeeva is truly hungry, they will have no desire for anything other than food. A person whose hunger is satisfied by getting and eating food can usually satisfy their minor desires with a little effort or can be persuaded to give them up. One can keep the body with desires for many days, but one cannot keep it with hunger even for a single day. Helplessness. A compassionate person who alleviates the hunger of suffering Jeevs with food will certainly have compassion to remove the helplessness of dependent Jeevs. There is no helplessness greater than the helplessness that comes with hunger. Helplessness can be remedied after some days, but hunger cannot be remedied in that manner. One can keep the body with helplessness, but one cannot keep it with hunger. Fear. A compassionate person who alleviates hunger will certainly have compassion to alleviate fear. There is no fear greater than the fear that comes from hunger and the fear that comes from killing. Fear can be removed through strategies, but hunger cannot be removed through strategies. One can keep the body with fear, but one cannot keep it with hunger. The afflictions and sufferings caused by hunger and killing are similar to each other. Therefore, one must know that alleviating the suffering caused by hunger and the suffering caused by killing is the main objective of JeevakaRunya. If alleviating the suffering caused by hunger and killing is the main objective of JeevakaRunya, why is only the alleviation of hunger emphasized repeatedly here? A person who is compassionate enough to relieve a being's hunger, knowing that the being might be killed by starvation, and thereby save its life, will also naturally feel pity and work to alleviate the suffering caused by killing that occurs through other means. Conversely, those who do not alleviate the suffering caused by killing are not considered compassionate enough to alleviate the suffering caused by hunger. The suffering caused by killing is subsumed within the suffering caused by hunger, because of the method required for relief. The death that comes from hunger cannot be prevented by any means other than food. The death that comes from enmity or other causes can be prevented by many stratagems and diplomatic means. A person who resolves to give food out of compassion for hunger will never consent to Jeevs being destroyed by other forms of violence. Therefore, one must know that the virtue of alleviating suffering caused by hunger is emphasized repeatedly. If the harm caused by hunger truly leads to the destruction of the body in all living beings, then the hunger of all Jeevs must be recognized and alleviated. But if one were to attempt this, it would be impossible to recognize and alleviate the hunger of the measureless, sevenfold classifications of beings created by God. The Devas, celestials, humans, Naragas, denizens of hell, animals, birds, creeping things and stationary things, plants. Why is this so? Devas. They have greater freedom than humans and possess the power to alleviate their hunger through their own effort. Therefore, it is not necessary for others to worry about their hunger. It is only necessary to have pity that they would also suffer if hunger occurred. Naragas. They are in other places, not in places accessible to us. Also, their hunger is alleviated by the attendance of God's punishment. Therefore, it is not necessary to worry about their hunger. It is only necessary to have pity that they would also suffer if hunger occurred. Stationary things like plants, trees, and grass. They have almost no free will due to fate. For those plants cultivated by humans for their livelihood, it is necessary to give them water to satisfy their need. However, all other plants live by receiving food according to the decree of grace. It is God's free will, not ours, to recognize and feed all of them. It is not necessary to worry about them, only to have pity that they would suffer without food. Creeping things, birds, and animals. They eat and satisfy their hunger according to the decree of grace and in accordance with their fate. It is God's free will, not ours, to recognize and feed them all. However, it is necessary to feed and satisfy the hunger of certain animals that humans acquire for their livelihood, such as the cow, bull, buffalo, ram, goat, and horse, using their own free will. Humans, men and women, the losses and sufferings caused by hunger, and the benefits and joys of alleviating hunger, are common and uniform for all humans. The sole wisdom that recognizes the losses and sufferings caused by hunger through the mind and other inner faculties and the senses is equal in all. Humans cannot survive and maintain their bodies merely with the food provided by the decree of grace according to their fate. They must maintain their bodies by satisfying their hunger with food earned through their own effort, wisdom, and acquired action. The Jeev's free will to earn through acquired action has been greatly granted to humans by grace. It is the decree of grace that humans are sometimes made to suffer from hunger when food is not available by fate, and are made to rely on others for the alleviation of that hunger, so that the donor gives food out of compassion, relieves the hunger, and guides the recipient to good action, while the donor attains miraculous powers and liberation. The human body is not easily acquired like other Jeev bodies. The manifestation of the soul and the manifestation of grace shine forth strongly in the human body. If this human body is lost, there is no certainty that this body will be regained. This human body is acquired specifically for attaining the bliss of liberation. The human body is the highest intelligent body, created by the will of God since the first creation. Because of all these reasons, and because God has decreed that humans must firmly and necessarily follow the rule of JeevaKarunya, which is to alleviate hunger, it must be understood that the discipline of JeevaKarunya in alleviating hunger with food must be predominantly practiced among humans. How is it that animals, birds, etc., are sustained only by the food mandated by grace according to their fate, while humans require both the fated food and the food acquired through volitional effort? One must know that it is essential for humans to have both fated food and food acquired through volitional effort because God has decreed that humans must consume the fated food to overcome the experience of prarabdha, past karma that is being experienced. Consume food acquired through akamiya, volitional action/present effort, to strengthen the body and faculties. Follow the path of Sanmarga, the good path, and attain the bliss of siddhi and mukti, spiritual perfection and liberation. As the bodies of animals, birds, creeping things, and stationary things are primarily decreed as bodies of punishment, they are given their fated food without obstruction by the power of grace as decreed by God, and thus they do not need to acquire food through volitional effort. Then why was JeevaKarunya initially referred to as universal, common to all living beings? It must be understood that the commandment of God is that JeevaKarunya is required towards all living beings because the discipline encompasses alleviating the suffering of all humans from hunger and bringing them the bliss of contentment through food. If the killing of a Jeev is imminent by any means other than hunger, that killing must be averted by whatever means possible within one's capability, and the Jeev must be brought back to life and happiness. If suffering occurs to Jeevs due to other causes like disease or fear, those sufferings must be alleviated if it is within one's capacity to do so. The suffering caused by fear must be alleviated from Jeevs like animals, birds, creeping things, and stationary things in any way possible. Even with regard to vicious creatures, one should only inflict little pain that arises from a little fear for protection or driving them away, and never inflict the pain that comes from killing. Since all these actions constitute JeevaKarunya, God has commanded that JeevaKarunya is required towards all living beings. Some of the animals that humans raise for their livelihood eat tamasic food like meat. In feeding them, should that kind of food not be given to satisfy their hunger? You must know that feeding one living being with the meat of another living being is not the discipline of JeevaKarunya at all. It is not God's will, and it is completely contrary to these principles. All living beings are parts of the natural reality and serve as the abode for grace, which is the natural manifestation of God. When the natural manifestation of God changes, there is no living essence. Since the natural manifestation of God and the natural manifestation of the living being are never opposed to each other, and both manifest within their respective bodies, killing one being to relieve the hunger of another being is in complete opposition to the discipline of JeevaKarunya. Vicious animals like the tiger and lion kill and eat another Jeev, satisfying their hunger with tamasic food, meat, and experiencing satisfaction and joy. Can this joy not be considered a fractional manifestation of God's inherent manifestation and the fulfillment of the soul's inherent manifestation? No, it cannot. The fractional manifestation of God's inherent manifestation, which is pure sattva, and the inherent manifestation of the soul, which is fractional sattva, do not shine forth through tamasic food, just as light does not shine forth through darkness. Why is this called tamasic food? It is called tamasic food because it is the food of violence, which obscures the soul's manifestation so that the manifestation of God does not appear. Then, whose manifestation is this shining joy of contentment that comes from this food? One must know that it is the manifestation of the beginningless illusion of the bound soul and its instruments. What is meant by pasu? Pasu is the soul that has lost its awareness due to its unity with the bondage of the three impurities: egoity, illusion, and karma. How does the manifestation appear in that Pasu? Just as special sunlight can be seen even through the darkness of a cloud that conceals the sun, making the darkness itself appear illuminated. Similarly, although the impure instruments of Asuddhamaya Kara and the Tamasa quality are inherently dark, they appear illuminated because of the special light of the Supreme Soul that they conceal. Thus, one must know that the manifestation that arises from Tamasa food is merely the manifestation of the impure instruments of Maya. But plants like trees, grass, and paddy are also said to be living beings. Isn't it also Tamasa food to harm them for consumption? And isn't the resulting joy merely the satisfaction of the impure mind instruments? Trees, grass, and paddy are indeed living beings, and consuming them is a partial Tamasa food, and the resulting joy is also a satisfaction of the impure instruments. However, this is not the case. Limited consciousness. These beings possess only one sense, that of touch. The soul's manifestation is only partially revealed in their bodies. No killing of the foundation. We only consume the seeds, vegetables, fruits, flowers, and leaves which appear as inert matter and are the basis for life to appear, but are without life themselves. We do not consume the actual life-bearing foundation of the plant. No pain infliction. Taking these parts such as seeds, fruits, etc. does not cause pain, just as removing semen, nails, or hair from a human does not cause pain. Absence of inner instruments. Since plant life lacks the activity of inner instruments like the mind, it is not considered an act of killing, nor does it inflict suffering. Therefore, it does not violate the discipline of Jeevakarunyam. You must know that the satisfaction derived from this food is truly the manifestation of God accompanied by the manifestation of the soul. How can the seeds that appear in trees and other plants be called inert places for life to enter later? If life were present in the seed already, it should grow before it is planted in the soil. Furthermore, some seeds do not grow even after being planted. A seed is merely the cause. Even children know that this cause is for the body to appear. Moreover, the soul is eternal and the body is non-eternal. The eternal soul does not require a cause, but the non-eternal body does. Therefore, one must know that seeds are inert matter. But how do the souls enter the seeds? One must know that when water is given to the seed embedded in the soil, the souls, accompanied by the subtle body, travel through the water according to the decree of God's grace, merge with the vital force of the soil, and enter the seeds. Some people say that sprouts should not be uprooted. How is it then possible to say that seeds, fruits, and leaves can be consumed? One must know that when the seed has settled in the soil, the soul enters through the water, merges with the vital force, and enters and sprouts in the seed. Since the sprout is not inert like the seed or the fruit, it is true that the sprouts should not be plucked. Even if there is no killing of life in seeds, fruits, etc., does eating them not result in the impurity that is found in nails, hair, or semen? Since there is no growth of the elements and no growth of the fundamental fluids, there is no impurity either. Therefore, you must know that consuming the seeds, fruits, and leaves of trees, grass, paddy, etc., is not contradictory to Jeevakarunyam. Is meat not the mandated food for vicious animals like the tiger and the lion? You must know that it is not the rule of creation for those creatures. It is merely a habit acquired through tradition. Therefore, it is possible to stop this practice and train them to eat sattva food. A person of virtue ensures that the cat and dog living in his house do not go outside to eat impure food. Right from the beginning, he trains them to eat only pure food, and they survive by consuming it. Likewise, ferocious species like the tiger and lion eat impure food through habit because there is no one supervising them and training them in pure food practices. Therefore, you must know with certainty that killing one being to relieve the hunger of another being is neither acceptable to God's grace nor the discipline of Jeevakarunyam. The twofold bliss of Jeevakarunyam. The bliss attained through the practice of Jeevakarunyam is of two types: lesser bliss and supreme bliss. Lesser bliss. The joy that comes from alleviating the suffering caused by factors like desire is lesser bliss. One must know that these are some of the joys experienced in this world. What are those joys of lesser bliss? When Jeevakarunyam arises towards those who suffer due to the lack of clothes to wear, a place to live, land to cultivate, a wife to marry, money and other various tools to accomplish their desires. And when these items, clothes for wearing, a place for dwelling, land for cultivating, a woman for marriage, money and other things for fulfilling desires are given to them, the resulting expression of bliss that appears on the faces of those who receive the aid, emanating from within, and the bliss that arises in the hearts of those who give the aid upon seeing the recipient's happiness, is known as lesser bliss because it appears as a partial manifestation in the instrument of God and a full manifestation in the instrument of the Jeev. Supreme bliss. The bliss that results from alleviating the suffering caused by hunger is the supreme bliss. You must know that this includes the joys that come from worldly perfections, the joys that come from yogic perfections, the joys that come from wisdom perfections, and finally, the bliss of liberation that is experienced when, out of Jeevakarunyam, food is given to the souls who are weakened by lack of sustenance, and their hunger is relieved by eating. The joy that flourishes, overflows, and surges within those Jeevs, the recipients, and on their faces, and the similar joy that arises within and on the face of the donors upon seeing it, is known as supreme bliss. This is because these joys appear as a complete manifestation in the instrument of God, accompanied by the soul. People suffering from the lack of clothes, dwelling, land, a spouse, or wealth can endure that suffering with mental fortitude, sustain their life, and continue to put forth whatever effort they can. However, when suffering arises from hunger, one must not endure that suffering with mental fortitude. If one attempts to endure it, they will lose their life. The intolerance of hunger. When hunger strikes, parents would resolve to sell their children and children to sell their parents. The husband would sell his wife and the wife would sell her husband, all to alleviate the suffering caused by that hunger. There is no need to speak of selling external assets like houses, cattle, land, and property to satisfy hunger. Even an emperor who rules the entire world, when faced with hunger, casts aside all his supreme authority and expresses his distress with humbled words to his ministers, saying, "I am hungry, what is to be done?" A valiant warrior, who would clutch the arrow lodged in his chest from an enemy and, without fear, defeat all opposing foes in an instant, when faced with hunger, loses his strength, fears the hunger, and laments to those standing nearby, "I feel faint, how can I fight?" Sages who despise the pleasures of this world and even the pleasures of Indra, celestial king, as straw, who have fully renounced, known wisdom, and realized divine experience, yogis who control their senses and are absorbed in inner concentration in true meditative steadfastness, siddhars who possess measureless great powers to even resurrect the dead, ascetics and thavasis, when faced with hunger, abandon their experienced spiritual goals and proceed to the nearby village to beg for alms. If alms are not received, they become bewildered and lose their composure. Honorable persons who would resolve to take their own life over a slight loss of dignity in a dream, when faced with hunger, compromise their honor and beg from those they should not speak to. Spiritual teachers who are staunch in their caste, religious, and customary observances, when hunger comes, forget their observances and look for food. Those who are full of learning, who know subtle truths difficult to grasp, and are capable of accomplishing deeds difficult to achieve, when faced with hunger, lose their intellect and focus and become confused. Lustful persons who revel in the pleasure of union, forgetting day and night, when faced with hunger, forget the union, become bitter about their desire, and are distressed. Arrogant persons who boast, "We are great, there is no one greater than us," when faced with hunger, lose their arrogance and praise those who give them food as great persons. Ostentatious persons who behave in many different ways to appear superior in all matters, when faced with hunger, lose their pretense and become bewildered. If those in high standing act in this manner, then what suffering must the poor, who have no support whatsoever, undergo when hunger strikes? One must know that the joy they would feel upon receiving food at that time, and the benefit the donors would receive for creating that joy, is beyond description. The afflictions of hunger. When hunger intensifies in living beings, the manifestation of the soul's wisdom is confused. As that is confused, the manifestation of God, which is the light of that wisdom, becomes obscured. As that becomes obscured, the principle of the experiencer becomes weak. As that weakens, the principle of nature becomes dull. As that becomes dull, all the qualities become distorted. The mind stumbles and scatters. The intellect is spoiled. The consciousness is agitated. The ego is destroyed. The life-breath whirls. All the elements are tormented. The three humors lose their stability. The eyes lose their sight and become sunken. The ears become deafened with a buzzing sound. The tongue dries up and becomes parched. The nose becomes slack and inflamed. The skin thins and loses consciousness. The hands and feet become weak and droop. The voice changes tone and stutters. The teeth loosen. The excretory and urinary passages become inflamed. The body darkens. The body hair stands on end. The nerves are weakened and suffer. The pulses loosen and become feeble. The bones are scorched, and the joints give way. The heart burns. The brain shrinks. The semen is inflamed and dries up. The liver melts away. The blood and fluids dry up. The flesh softens and loses its quality. The stomach burns intensely with a sudden heat. Grief and sorrow intensify continuously. The signs and experiences of being very close to losing life appear continuously. This level of affliction that arises from hunger is common to all living beings. All these afflictions vanish when food is received and hunger is alleviated. At that time, all the principles flourish. The heart cools. Wisdom shines forth. A peerless bliss of contentment arises. With the grace of the soul and the grace of God overflows within and on the face. What virtue can be equated with the virtue that creates such bliss? What divine being can be equated with the virtuous person who performs this act? One must truly know that they are the part of God, who is superior to all other divine beings. Thus, it is known that the suffering of hunger is the total sum of the three sufferings: the suffering of hell, the suffering of birth, and the suffering of death. The bliss of contentment arising from food is the bliss of liberation, which is everywhere, internal, external, middle, below, above, and sides, and does not change at any time. Hunger, an instrument of help. If there were no hunger, living beings would not look to one another for food. If they did not look to one another, helpful action would not arise. If helpful action did not arise, JeevaKarunya would not manifest. If JeevaKarunya did not manifest, the grace of God would not be attained. Therefore, you must know that hunger is an instrument of help given by God. The joy that suffering Jeevs feel when they see food is a joy they do not feel when they see their mother, father, wife, children, property, land, gold, or jewels. If this is the case, then what must the joy be like when food is consumed? Therefore, you must know that the nature, form, and qualities of this food are to be considered the fractional nature, form, and qualities of God's grace itself. JeevaKarunya. JeevaKarunya is the act of extinguishing the fire called hunger that is burning inside the bodies of the poor by giving them food. JeevaKarunya is the act of giving food to reignite the lamp of the poor's wisdom, which is on the verge of being extinguished by the poisonous wind called hunger. JeevaKarunya is the act of giving food to illuminate the temples of the body, which are the abode of God's inherent manifestation, when they are about to be ruined by hunger. JeevaKarunya is the act of giving food to stabilize the entire family of tattvas of the soul residing in the body to attain divine bliss, when that family is stumbling and about to be destroyed by hunger. JeevaKarunya is the act of slaying the tiger called hunger when it starts to pounce and kill the lives of the poor, thereby rescuing that life. JeevaKarunya is the act of using food to bring down the poison called hunger when it has ascended to the head, causing the Jeev to be confused and restoring their clarity. JeevaKarunya is the act of using food to remove the intense pain and distress of the poor when the cruel scorpion called hunger has entered and stung their stomach. JeevaKarunya is the act of removing the anxiety of the poor Jeevs who worry thinking, "The sinner called hunger, which killed and consumed half of us yesterday, will return today. What shall we do?" JeevaKarunya is the act of removing the confusion of the poor Jeevs who are bewildered, like a fly trapped in honey, thinking, "The sun is rising. Now the torment called hunger will befall me. What can be done about this fate?" JeevaKarunya is the act of relieving the sorrow of the poor Jeevs who are sunk in worry, thinking, "It is getting dark. Where shall we go for food? Whom shall we ask? What shall we do?" Jeevakarunya is the act of giving food to the poor who shed tears, saying, "Walking and walking, my feet are tired. Asking and asking, my mouth is tired. Thinking and thinking, my mind is tired. Now what shall I do for this sinful stomach?" Jeevakarunya is the act of giving food to protect the honor of honorable Jeeves whose minds and faces are weakened, who cannot bring themselves to speak, and whose minds are tormented like a mute person who has seen an ill-fated dream, thinking, "The day is over and hunger torments me. Shame prevents me from going to other places. Honor hurts me from asking aloud. My stomach burns. I don't even know how to end my life. Why did I take this body?" Jeevakarunya is the act of giving food to the poor Jeeves who are unable to sleep and suffer, arguing with themselves. If we had recognized and relieved the hunger of the starving in our previous birth, someone would surely come to recognize and relieve our hunger in this birth. Since we did not do that then, there is no one to do it for us now, thereby removing their suffering and allowing them to sleep. Jeevakarunya is the act of giving food to quench the fire of hunger of the wise who, even when extremely weakened by hunger, with nerves showing all over their body, life receding and fainting, still do not dare to ask others, but instead think of God repeatedly and lie down as if to sleep while carrying the cruel fire of hunger in their lower abdomen. Jeevakarunya is the act of giving food to the poor who suffer with tears in their eyes, holding their hands to their cheeks, while the fire of hunger, the fire of fear, and the fire of sorrow rage within them like the fire stoked by a blacksmith's bellows, thinking, "How can I starve today as I did yesterday? Even if I, in my youthful spirit, am ready to starve today, what shall I do for my poor wife who cannot bear hunger? More than her hunger, my aged parents, extremely weak from old age, will die if they starve today. What shall I do about this? How shall I look at the weakened faces of my children who are exhausted from crying over hunger?" Jeevakarunya is the act of giving food to the poor who suffer alone, thinking repeatedly, "Even those who are without defects in their eyes, hands, feet, and other limbs, and have the strength to earn food, are suffering from hunger and lying down here. Then how will we, who are blind, deaf, mute, and crippled, get food? How will our hunger be relieved?" Jeevakarunya is the act of recognizing that God's manifestation shines equally in all living beings and treating all persons suffering from hunger universally, without making distinctions based on their country, religion, caste, or profession, and relieving their hunger according to their respective needs. Jeevakarunya is the act of alleviating the hunger of living beings, such as animals, birds, reptiles, and plants who are fit to relieve their hunger with sattvic food that is agreeable to the discipline of Sanmarga. Jeevakarunya and the path to liberation. Even though some beings have the intellect to obtain the rights and privileges to satisfy their hunger, due to their past karma and carelessness, they fail to secure those rights and suffer from hunger. To provide food to such beings, remove their suffering of hunger, and create the joy of satisfaction, the key to which is called Jeevakarunya. Only by using this key can one open the door to the higher dwelling called liberation, enter, and live by experiencing the everlasting, undiminishing bliss. Therefore, those householders who secure this key to the house of moksha, which is called Jeevakarunya, while they are still living, will not need the assistance of practices such as ritual service, devotional acts, meditation, or spiritual wisdom. They will attain the abode of everlasting bliss, open the door to that house, enter, and live as eternal freed souls. Even if practitioners of rituals and devotees who perform service and rituals such as circumambulating holy lands, bathing in holy waters, residing in holy places, worshipping holy deities, singing praises, chanting mantras, observing vows, performing sacrifices, performing divine worship, yogis who abstain from food and sleep, renounce worldly attachments, control their senses, achieve mental absorption, and engage in yoga. Siddhars who have attained measureless powers and perfection. Sages who have realized the eternal and non-eternal, renounced all attachments, and attained the experience of the supreme reality. If all these individuals have not acquired the key called Jeevakarunya, they will only be able to climb near the door of the upper house of moksha, wait nearby, and then be compelled to return to acquire that key. They will not be able to open the door, enter, and live in bliss. This you must truly know. One must know that householders who possess the discipline of JeevKarunya and enjoy worldly pleasures like eating and associating are entirely worthy of the grace of the all-powerful God. Conversely, those who engage in practices like wisdom, yoga, austerity, vows, chanting, and meditation without the discipline of JeevKarunya are not worthy of God's grace, even slightly. Furthermore, they should not even be considered to possess the manifestation of the soul. You must understand that all actions performed without JeevKarunya are merely useless acts of illusion. Compassion and the householder's duty. Given that all living beings are parts of God's natural reality and God's grace manifests in each of them, for those with limited means. For householders with limited means who can barely afford to feed their immediate family, mother, father, spouse, children, dependents, it is not agreeable to God's grace to neglect suffering family members to feed strangers. It is also not agreeable to God's grace to neglect hungry strangers who arrive while prioritizing only the family. Therefore, one should economize their family expenses as much as possible and alleviate the hunger of both the family and outsiders. For those with very limited means. For householders with very little capacity, who struggle even to feed their own family, they must at least ensure their own family's hunger is relieved. They must then show great compassion to hungry strangers and make every effort to have another person relieve the stranger's hunger. For capable and prominent householders. For genuinely capable and prominent householders, according to their income, they must relieve the hunger and create the bliss of satisfaction for a wide circle, including mother, father, spouse, children, dependents, relatives, friends, guests, elders, servants, neighbors, and even enemies. They must also feed the animals and plants, cow, bull, sheep, horse, etc., that they keep to aid their family life. Compassion in social and religious events. Householders must eliminate the spending on elaborate rituals, amusements, and displays of grandeur associated with various events like marriage, childbirth, and deity worship. Instead, they should perform the special act of relieving the hunger of famished beings and generating happiness during those same occasions. You must know with certainty that by doing this, they will attain a bliss that is many times greater than the satisfaction attained by the person whose hunger was relieved. Householders, during special occasions like marriage, decorate the venue, perform various rites, conduct entertainment like dance, music, processions, and celebratory arrangements like special sweets and elaborate meals, becoming engrossed in delight. At such times, they do not even consent to look at the faces of the hungry poor. When they are sunk in such joy, if some danger or affliction befalls themselves, their children, or their spouses, they then lose all that joy and are filled with grief. When they suffer this grief, they find that the decorated venue, the rites based on desire and doubt, the entertainment of dance, music, instruments, and processions, and the elaborate meals cannot prevent that danger. If, during that auspicious event, they had truly given food to the hungry Jeeves, removed their hunger, and caused the manifestation of God and the bliss of God to shine forth on their inner self and their faces, wouldn't that manifestation and bliss have truly averted the danger that arose and established illumination and bliss instead? Therefore, it must be known that even during special functions like marriage, the most important thing is to alleviate the hunger of the poor according to one's capacity and create the bliss of contentment. The blessings of making JeevKarunya a vow. 4. Curing diseases. It is true that if householders suffering from incurable diseases like colic, gastric disorder, and leprosy follow the vow of alleviating the hunger of the starving according to their capacity, that very adherence to JeevKarunya will act as the best medicine, curing those diseases and creating great comfort. For attaining progeny. It is true that if householders who are distressed after performing many vows without having children for many years follow the vow of alleviating the hunger of the poor according to their capacity, that very adherence to JeevKarunya will bring forth wise and good progeny. For longevity. It is true that if householders who are worried and fearful of dying because they have been destined for a short lifespan follow the vow of alleviating the hunger of the poor according to their capacity, that very adherence to JeevKarunya will bring forth long life. For wealth and wisdom. It is true that if householders who are distressed about acquiring education, wisdom, wealth, and pleasure follow the vow of alleviating the hunger of the poor according to their capacity, that very adherence to JeevaKarunya will grant them education, wisdom, wealth, and pleasure. For ultimate protection and prosperity. For householders who practice JeevaKarunya by making it a vow to alleviate the hunger of the starving. The heat of summer will not distress them. The earth will not scorch them. Natural disasters such as heavy rain, great wind, severe frost, great thunder, and great fire will not cause them suffering. Diseases caused by carelessness, such as cholera, poisonous air, and poisonous fever, will not occur. These householders, full of JeevaKarunya, will not be troubled by floods, thieves, or enemies. They will not be disgraced by kings or deities. The farmland of householders who possess JeevaKarunya will yield increased harvests without effort. Their trade will see profit without hindrance, and their profession will bring success without loss. They will be surrounded by relatives and servants. They will not be intimidated by vicious beasts, poisonous creatures, evil spirits, or malicious deities. No kind of danger will truly befall householders who possess JeevaKarunya, whether due to carelessness or fate. The divine commandment. The supreme vow, the discipline of JeevaKarunya, which is to alleviate the hunger of the starving and create bliss, must necessarily be performed by everyone. This includes devas, humans, brahmacharis, householders, ascetics, sannyasis, renunciates, men, women, the elderly, the youth, the highborn, and the lowborn. This must be understood as the commandment of God. You must also know that in the matter of relieving the hunger of the starving, one must conduct the discipline of JeevaKarunya without being hindered, even if the wife hinders the husband hinders the wife, the father hinders the children hinder the father, the preceptor hinders the disciples, the master hinders the servant, or the king hinders his subjects. They must truly believe that the good and bad consequences of their actions will fall upon themselves alone and nowhere else. Those virtuous people who resolve to give food to Jeevs suffering from genuine hunger must truly be known as yogis. This is because at the moment of resolve, their mind is detached from all other attachments and becomes a pure instrument. When they proceed to serve and give the food as resolved, they must truly be known as sages. This is because they delight in the knowledge that the recipient's eating is the same as their own eating. Upon giving the food, those virtuous people directly perceive and experience the manifestation of God and the bliss of God, which fills the inner self, the outer self, below, above, center, and sides of the soul, cooling all the principles and causing the entire body to tingle with freshness, shining forth through the face. Therefore, they must be known as those who have seen God and as liberated souls who experience the bliss of God. Since those whose hunger has been relieved and who are now joyful worship these virtuous people as God, they must truly be known as gods themselves. It must be known that the excellent individuals who possess the discipline of JeevaKarunya and relieve Jeevs from the danger of hunger regardless of their caste, religion, or profession will be accorded the special honor of being worshipped by devas, munis, siddhars, yogis, and all others. This is declared to be true by the witness of the all-powerful God. The further details of this JeevaKarunya discipline can be found in the Samarasa Veda, the Veda of universal harmony. JeevaKarunya. Part 2. Those who have obtained the highest birth in the world, which is the human birth, must quickly realize and attain the supreme blissful life of the soul, which is achievable through this birth, while they still have the time in this lifetime. If one asks, what are the types of that supreme blissful life of the soul? It must be known that there are 3 types: worldly blissful life, celestial blissful life, supreme blissful life. Worldly bliss. Worldly bliss is the happiness experienced for a few days, involving the attainment of small bodies and instruments, through small efforts, and engaging with small worldly subjects/objects. Gain of worldly bliss. Gain of worldly bliss is the experience of enjoying worldly subjects for a few days in the human birth, being free from defects in the body, senses, and surroundings, possessing good knowledge, being free from obstacles like hunger, disease, and killing, being embraced by relatives, friends, and neighbors, and living with a virtuous spouse so that progeny may flourish. Glory of attaining worldly bliss. If one wishes to know the glory of those who attain worldly bliss, one must know that it is to possess auspicious qualities like love, compassion, discipline, humility, patience, truthfulness, and purity, and to live honorably by striving to enjoy worldly pleasures. Celestial bliss. Celestial bliss is the happiness experienced for many days by attaining large bodies and instruments in a superior birth, through great effort, and engaging with large subjects/objects. Gain of celestial bliss. The gain of celestial bliss is the blissful gain of obtaining a superior birth in the afterlife and experiencing pure subjects/objects for a long duration, without hindrance, possessing all the virtuous qualities mentioned in the attainment of worldly bliss, but on a higher level. Glory of attaining celestial bliss. If you wishes to know the glory of those who attain celestial bliss, you must know that it is to possess auspicious qualities such as love, compassion, etc., and live a celebrated life by striving to experience the bliss of pure subjects for a long time without obstruction, as desired. Supreme bliss. Supreme bliss is that unique, great bliss experienced without any hindrance whatsoever, at any time, in any place, and in any manner. This is attained by receiving the full, natural bliss of God, who is the perfect embodiment of natural reality. This bliss arises through the special presence of God's power of grace, which reveals and illuminates all bodies, all instruments, all realms, and all enjoyments as manifestations of the divine itself. Gain of supreme bliss. The gain of supreme bliss is the state where everything shines forth as the self. Glory of attaining supreme bliss. If you wish to know the glory of those who attain supreme bliss, they are beings who have transformed the body, made of the impure elements like skin, nerve, bone, flesh, blood, and semen, and their cause, the atoms of impure prakriti, and attained 3 superior bodies. The pure body, Suddha, a pure elemental body like high-grade, unquantifiable gold. The Prava body, Pravadaham, a pure causal body that appears golden but is intangible, like space. The wisdom body, Jnanadaham, a body that shines like space, without any visible form. Mastery over the elements. Earth. They are not pierced by the hardness of earth within. Stones or earth thrown from outside will not strike their form. Water. They are not cooled by the nature of water within. If immersed in water, their form will not sink. Fire. They are not burned by the heat of fire within. If burned by fire outside, heat or scars will not appear on their body. Air. They are not shaken by the force of wind within. Wind outside will not touch or shake their form. Space. They are not obscured by the combination of space within. Space outside will not obscure their body. Their body can traverse in both supported and unsupported environments. Transcendence of senses and action. Their senses, eyes, ears, etc., and organs of action, speech, etc., do not normally engage with subjects. But when they choose to engage out of compassion, their eyes can see and know subjects in any place, e.g. behind walls or mountains, from where they are. Their ears can hear speech from anywhere in the macrocosm or microcosm from where they are. Their tongue can taste flavors from anywhere, from where they are. Their body can feel touches from anywhere, from where they are. Their hands can give to beings anywhere from where they are. Their feet can walk anywhere from where they are. Their speech can communicate with anyone, anywhere, from wherever they are. Transcendence of internal instruments and knowledge. Their inner instruments, like the mind, do not normally grasp subjects. But if they choose to engage out of compassion, the mind can simultaneously recall, investigate, and determine the thoughts and plans of all beings in all worlds within a single minute. Their knowledge does not normally specify subjects. But if it specifies out of compassion, it can simultaneously know and specify all worlds, all beings, all qualities, all experiences, and all benefits within a single minute. Freedom from cosmic constraints. They are nirgwas and are not afflicted by the 3 qualities within. Their qualities do not grasp the external instruments. They are not obscured by prakriti within. Their prakriti does not grasp the external qualities. They are not differentiated by the principle of time within. Their sacred form is not hindered by time outside. They are not measured by the measure of order within. Their sacred form is not limited by order outside. They have transcended Maya and shine forth as the very form of knowledge above the pure great Maya. They are not constrained by food, sleep, sex, or fear. Their body does not possess faults like a shadow, sweat, dirt, gray hair, wrinkles, old age, or death. Their body is never tormented by cold, rain, thunder, heat, or by demons, asuras, ghosts, ghouls, devas, sages, humans, hell-dwellers, animals, birds, reptiles, or plants. Their body cannot be cut by weapons like swords or knives. Ultimate divine status. All worlds appear small as atoms, and all atoms appear vast as worlds to their body. Karma cities, raising the dead, restoring youth, yoga cities, and jnana cities constantly shine forth in their presence. The 5 cosmic functions, creation, sustenance, destruction, concealment, and bestowing grace, occur the moment they will it. The 5 cosmic agents carry out their duties by their mere glance. Their knowledge, action, and experience are the knowledge, action, and experience of God. They are all-powerful, eternal, free from the 3 impurities and their residual influences, and shine forth as the form of great grace. A single inert straw can gain life and perform the 5 cosmic activities by their sacred glance. Their glory shines throughout the 6 ends of philosophy, namely Vedanta, Siddhanta, Kalanta, Bodhanta, Nidanta, and Yoganta, and it must be known that it shines even beyond them. This must be understood as the glories of those who have attained the supreme bliss. If one asks, by what means can these 3 types of blissful life be attained? It must be known that they can be attained by the fractional part of grace and the completeness of grace, which is the inherent manifestation of God. If one asks, among the 3 types of bliss, which are attainable by the fractional part of grace, and which is attainable by the completeness of grace, it must be known that the gain of worldly bliss and the gain of celestial bliss can be attained by the fractional part of grace, and the gain of supreme bliss can be attained by the completeness of grace. If one asks, what is the nature of grace, the inherent manifestation of God, one must know that it possesses the nature of full illumination, which shines forth and illuminates all the natures of all power, namely, the natures spoken by speakers, the natures contemplated by thinkers, the natures known by knowers, and the natures experienced by experiencers, as its own partial natures. If one asks, where does that grace manifest? One must know that it shines forth in all places and at all times, including the place where the seer sees and the place that is seen, the place where the listener hears and the place that is heard, the place where the taster tastes and the place that is tasted, the place where the smeller smells and the place that is smelled, the place where the toucher touches and the place that is touched, the place where the speaker speaks and the place that is spoken, the place where the doer acts and the place that is acted upon, the place where the walker walks and the place that is walked upon, the place where the releaser releases and the place that is released, the place where the thinker thinks and the place that is thought about, the place where the inquirer inquires and the place that is inquired about, the place where the resolver resolves and the place that is resolved upon, the place where the impeller impels and the place that is impelled, the place where the knower knows and the place that is known, the place where the experiencer experiences and the place that is experienced. It is present in the subject, the action, and the object at all times, everywhere. If one asks, by what means can that grace be attained? It must be known that it can be attained only through the discipline of Jeevakarunya, compassion towards living beings. If one asks, how is it that grace can be attained through the discipline of Jeevakarunya? Grace is the inherent manifestation of God or God's compassion. Jeevakarunya is the inherent manifestation of the soul's or soul's compassion. Therefore, it is possible to attain the great manifestation by means of the small manifestation, which is the unified instrument. Attain the great compassion by means of the small compassion. This is analogous to obtaining a great fire using a small spark. This shows that Jeevakarunya is the Sanmarga. When Jeevakarunya manifests, wisdom and love shine forth together. This causes the power to do good to manifest, and from that power to do good, all benefits arise. When Jeevakarunya disappears, wisdom and love simultaneously disappear. This causes the power to do good to disappear, and when that power disappears, all evils arise. Therefore, one must know that virtue is JeevaKarunya alone, and sin is the absence of JeevaKarunya alone. Furthermore, one must truly know that the manifestation that comes through JeevaKarunya is the manifestation of God, and the bliss that results is the bliss of God. The realized sages who have known, attained, experienced, and achieved completeness in this manifestation and bliss are the liberated souls who attained the gain of supreme bliss mentioned previously, and they are the ones who have known God through wisdom and become one with God. If one asks, what is the characteristic of the discipline of JeevaKarunya? It must be known that it is living a life of worship to God, with the soul-melting compassion that arises generally among living beings concerning other living beings. If one asks, how is the worship of God accomplished by means of the soul-melting compassion that arises regarding living beings? One must know that as the soul-melting compassion continuously arises from living beings towards other living beings, the divine grace, which is the manifestation of God residing within that soul, will manifest and shine forth completely. As that sacred grace shines, the bliss of God becomes an experience and attains completion. One must know that the completion of that experience is itself the worship of God. If one wishes to know how the divine grace, which is the manifestation of God residing within the soul, manifests as the soul-melting compassion continuously arises, one must know that it manifests itself just as butter lies hidden within curd and fire within wood, both emerging only when the curd is gently churned, and the wood earnestly rubbed. Likewise, as compassion deepens, it becomes the sacred friction that awakens the latent grace, allowing it to shine forth from within. The increasing compassion acts as the friction that releases the latent grace, just as churning releases butter and rubbing releases fire. If one asks, how does the bliss of God become a complete experience as the divine grace manifests? One must know that the bliss of God becomes complete, just as the true nature of butter and fire becomes a complete experience when they manifest from curd and wood, respectively. If one asks, when does soul-melting compassion arise? One must know that soul-melting compassion arises when beings are seen, heard, or known to be experiencing suffering due to hunger, killing/death, disease, danger/accident, thirst, fear, poverty/lack, desire/longing. Defining the causes of suffering. Hunger. It is the fire of the differentiated Maya product, Vikapa Maya Kriya Pyapipa Guthi Narapu, which is the initial cause that spreads within the stomach due to the lack of food, searing the qualities of the instruments and faculties inside and outside the body, weakening the wisdom, and forcing the soul to manifest. Killing. It is the cruel action of the differentiated elemental product, Vikapa Buddha Kriya Kauntashil, which serves as the cause for creating agitation and disturbance in the instruments and faculties inside and outside the body through various actions of those instruments, weakening the wisdom, and forcing the soul to manifest. Disease. It is the result of distortion in the differentiated Maya product of the body, which serves as the cause for the soul to manifest. This distortion is due to variations in Veda, Pitta, and Lumam, 3 humors, causing exhaustion and damage to the instruments and faculties inside and outside the body, and weakening the wisdom.
Danger.
It is the obstacles that impede the enjoyment of the body and its pleasures, caused by ego, forgetfulness, and differences in karma. Fear. It is the trembling that occurs in the faculties and the wisdom when subjects that cause damage to the body and other instruments are encountered. Poverty/lack. It is the failure to acquire tools such as education and wealth through one's own free will. Desire/longing. It is the mental modification that causes one to continually contemplate the desired subjects, focusing on their rarity or value. Hierarchy of obstacles. Among these, the obstacles are categorized as primary, intermediate, and final obstacles. Primary obstacles. Hunger and killing, because they obstruct all 3 types of bliss, worldly, celestial, and supreme. Intermediate obstacles. Disease, fear, danger, and poverty/lack, because they obstruct worldly and celestial bliss to some extent. Final obstacle. Desire, because it obstructs worldly bliss only to some extent. If one asks, what is the power of JeevaKarunya? one must know that its power lies in motivating one to strive to remove the very suffering, such as hunger, killing, etc., that first awakened compassion, ensuring that other beings do not endure it again. If one asks, what is the benefit of JeevaKarunya? One must know that its benefit is to create bliss for all living beings. The nature, form, qualities, and pervasiveness of this JeevaKarunya can be understood in the third part. JeevaKarunya. Part 3. If one asks, what is the basis or right for the arising of the soul-melting compassion known as JeevaKarunya? One must know that all living beings are brethren of a single right/kinship, because they are fractional parts of the single, inherent reality of God, brought into physical bodies by the power of God's grace. Just as compassion arises in one sibling upon seeing or hearing another sibling suffer from danger since they recognize the suffering body as their sibling's body, which is a bodily right, similarly, when one living being sees, hears, or knows another is suffering from danger, the compassion that arises because they recognize that being as their soul kin is the soul right. If one asks, why are some people hard-hearted and lack JeevaKarunya even when they see suffering, despite this universal soul right existing? It is because the eye of soul knowledge, which has the capacity to know the suffering being as my soul kin, and as one who is suffering/will suffer, has been greatly dulled by the cataract of ignorance. Furthermore, the supportive inner instruments, like the mind, which act as lenses for the eye of knowledge, are thick and lack the reflection of brightness. Therefore, one must understand that even though the soul right exists, the ability to perceive and act on it is lost, resulting in the lack of JeevaKarunya. If one asks, where does the power or energy of this soul-melting compassion reside? It must be known that the power of JeevaKarunya resides in the act of alleviating the obstacle, whether it be hunger, disease, killing, or any other impediment that caused the compassion to arise. If one asks, therefore, the sufferings that come to Jeevs from hunger, killing, disease, etc., are experiences of the physical instruments like the mind and eyes, and not experiences of the soul. If so, what is the answer to those who say, there is no special benefit from JeevaKarunya? In this body, everything except the soul and the manifestation of God, which is the intelligence of intelligence, are inert instruments. They are not the conscious soul. Therefore, pleasure and pain are experienced by the conscious soul, not by the inert principles, tattvas. The mind, senses, and other instruments are like the appliances within a small house built by God's grace for the life of the Jeev. The inhabitant experiences joy and sorrow, but the inert materials of the house, earth, stone, wood, fire, water, etc., do not. Furthermore, when eyes, whose vision is dimmed by a cataract and are looking through corrective glasses, see something sorrowful, the eyes will shed tears, but the glasses will not shed tears. Thus, the instruments like the mind, which are merely auxiliary means for the soul's perception, do not experience pleasure or sorrow. If one asks, when a Jeev experiences happiness, the mind rejoices, and when sorrow occurs, the mind is discouraged. Does this not mean the mind experiences pleasure and pain? What is the answer to those who claim this? Just as the luster and fatigue of the house owner inside a crystal house are reflected and appear on the exterior of the house, and just as the brightness and weariness of the eyes are reflected on the glasses worn over them, similarly, the joy and discouragement that arise in the soul due to pleasure and pain are reflected and appear outwardly in the faculties and senses like the mind and eyes. Furthermore, when a lamp placed inside a house shines brightly, the house and its instruments also appear very bright. When the light of the lamp diminishes, the house and its contents also diminish in brightness. Therefore, the conclusive answer is that pleasure and pain are not the experience of the mind, but the experience of the soul alone, and that the faculties and senses are merely aiding tools for the soul's experience. If one asks, why do many living beings created by God suffer immensely from hunger, killing, disease, and the like? It is because these are the beings who, in a previous body, rejected the discipline of JeevaKarunya, became hard-hearted, and followed the evil path. Therefore, according to the divine rule of grace decreed by God, they are suffering greatly from hunger, killing, and disease in the present life. If one asks, how do we know that a previous body exists? Just as we know that a tenant who paid rent to live in this house must have previously paid rent and lived in another house, and that they cannot live without a house, and that if conflict arises in this house, they will move to yet another house. and that they will avoid paying rent and moving if they build a permanent house for themselves. Similarly, the soul that came to live in this body by paying the food rent must have lived in a previous body by paying that same rent. The soul cannot live without a body. If conflict arises in this body, the soul will move to another body. Once the soul obtains its own eternal body of grace, it will no longer need to move into another body. If one asks, why do some people argue variously that souls neither take a previous body nor a subsequent body, and that if the current body is destroyed, the possessor of the body is also destroyed, or that some will attain liberation, or that some will eternally experience sin and virtue, or that some will remain in the state of the body's destruction? It is because those who argue this are associated with the materialistic schools, which hold that the body is the soul and worldly enjoyment is liberation. They are people who could not know the truth through direct experience or established proofs, realizing that there is a conscious soul residing in the inert body. That soul is subject to bondage and liberation. The soul takes various bodies due to the variations of bondage until it attains liberation. One must know that their tenets lack proof, logic, and experience. If one asks, how is it that they are wrong? If one claims Jeevs attain bodies and enjoyments by their own free will, they should attain the bodies and enjoyments they desire. However, some have sound bodies and enjoy pleasure as desired, while others have defective bodies and suffer misery, contrary to their wishes. Therefore, Jeevs do not attain bodies and enjoyments by their own will. If one claims it is by nature, nature must be uniform and unchanging at all times. Since the bodies and enjoyments are of various kinds and not uniform, it is not by nature. If one claims it is by God's will, since God is possessed of compassion and justice, he should grant blissful experiences uniformly to all Jeevs. Since this is not the case, it is not God's will. One must conclude and affirm that when God ordained the rules for the first creation for Jeevs to experience their inherent bliss, the Jeevs failed to practice those rules and thus failed in their effort. Consequently, the variations in effort arising from that primordial impurity caused many different bodies and enjoyments to occur in the second creation. If one claims that when the current body fails, no other body is taken, from the first creation until now, there has been an immeasurable number of destroyed bodies. By this logic, there should also be an immeasurable number of destroyed souls. If so, souls should stop taking bodies. But this is not the case. They continue to take bodies. If one claims that new souls are created, and new bodies are created for them, it is only possible to create new bodies. It is not possible to newly create the soul that resides in the body. The soul is eternally existent. It has no origin or destruction and cannot be created or destroyed. The soul is understood to be eternal. It has no beginning and no end. It cannot be created or destroyed. If souls were created like a pot, they could not experience pleasure or sorrow, attain virtue or sin, and would perish just like a pot. If they perish, there is no bondage and no liberation. Therefore, just as even children know that when a pot breaks, the air and space inside the pot remain unbroken, one must understand with wisdom that when the body is destroyed, the manifestation of the soul and the manifestation of God within the body are not destroyed. And it is a truth that souls attain variations in bodies and enjoyments due to variations in their effort. Evidence for rebirth. A mother and father give birth to twins at the same time. One child is fair, one is dark. One child has physical defects, one is without defects. One child drinks milk, one makes a noise when drinking milk. One child is sick, one is healthy. One child speaks at 2 years old, one remains speechless. If one deeply investigates the source of these differences, which arise without any immediate local cause for the twins, one realizes that these are the variations in effort, karma, from the bodies taken in previous births. Furthermore, when the twins are 3 years old and are playing and eating sweets given by their parents, if a third child approaches, one twin gives the sweets in his hand, while the other prevents the giving. One twin takes a book and reads like a child, while the other snatches the book, throws it, and hits the first, saying reading is forbidden. One twin is fearful while the other is fearless. If one investigates how qualities like compassion, love, wisdom, and action appear or are absent in these children without their parents having taught them, one must realize through experience that these are the residues from the previous bodies taken by the two children that have come into this birth without being taught. If this is realized, one will know well that souls have bodies both before and after the current one. It must be known that those who deny rebirth do so because they do not understand this truth. Analogies for the soul's transition. If the gross body is undestroyed, and the soul still takes various bodies in a dream and experiences various wonders, there is no need to explain that when this body is left, the soul will take another body and experience the effects related to its residues. If a person, by siddhi, spiritual perfection, leaves this body and enters another body, there is no need to explain that when this body is destroyed, the soul will enter another body due to variations in karma. If a bird, due to the variation in time and quality, comes from the body of an egg to the body of a chick, there is no need to explain that the soul will move from this body to another body due to variations in karma. If an insect, by the power of a wasp, moves from the body of a worm to the body of a wasp, there is no need to explain that a soul will move from one body to another body due to karma. If a soul, within a single lifetime, moves from the body of an infant to the body of a child to the body of a youth, and to the body of the elderly, there is no need to explain that the soul will enter a different physical body due to variations in karma. If souls, within a single lifetime, move from the body of a female to the body of a male and from the body of a male to the body of a female due to variations in mantra and tantra, there is no need to explain that the soul will take another body due to variations in karma. Furthermore, if the soul in a plant body transitions within that same body to the body of an emerald worm, or if an ant transitions within that same body to the body of a pilikapachi, peacock-like bird, or if a snake transitions within that same body to another body called a sarpapachi, snake-eating bird, if the souls residing in the respective bodies of humans, animals, birds, creeping things, aquatic life, and plants take on different bodies even while in their current body, there is no need to explain that when those respective bodies are destroyed, the soul will take another body. If one asks, some people say, if a previous body is real, who were you in that body? What is your history? What is the answer to their question? When a 70-year-old man is asked, what is your history from when you were 5 years old? He replies, if I become bewildered and cannot recount my history from just yesterday due to the variation in my present state, how can I recount the history of my 5 years of age? And how can you ask for it? If a person is bewildered and cannot recount the history of his life within a single birth due to the variation in his states, how can we, who are confused across many states, recount the histories of our previous bodies? This must be understood as the answer. If one asks, how is it that the virtuous and sinful actions done by Jeeves in a previous body come into this body? If a householder previously living in a house associated with evildoers, those evildoers will come and associate with him even after he moves to a new house. Similarly, if a soul, while residing in a previous body, desired and performed sinful deeds, those sinful karmas will come and attach themselves to that soul when it comes into a new body. The same principle applies to virtuous karmas. If it is the rule of God's grace that those souls who neglected JeevaKarunya in a past life should suffer from hunger and thirst in this life, would showing compassion and giving them food not violate God's rule of grace? A king orders food to be given to great criminals who are bound and imprisoned for defying his orders. Similarly, God orders his attendant deities to provide food to sinners bound in hell for completely opposing his command. However, the king may dismiss minor offenders who disobeyed his general orders from their offices, stripping them of their earnings and privileges, to instill good sense and send them out. When kind people see these dismissed offenders wandering and suffering for food, and give them sustenance, the king, upon seeing or hearing of it, rejoices and treats the giver as a kind, good householder, placing them in a high position. He does not become angry. Similarly, God dismisses minor offenders, souls who disobeyed, from the blissful realms and enjoyments he provided, placing them in another body to suffer and attain good sense. When kind beings see these suffering souls and provide sustenance, God rejoices and blesses the givers to attain ever-increasing bliss and will not become angry. Therefore, the true answer is that the practice of compassion and service among beings is agreeable to the rule of God's grace. Worldly and heavenly discipline. Worldly discipline flourishes through JeevaKarunya. If it is absent, the worldly discipline will not flourish at all. When JeevaKarunya is absent, wisdom and love do not appear. When they do not appear, kindness, unity, and helpfulness do not manifest. When they do not manifest, the conduct of weak Jeevs is obstructed and destroyed by strong Jeevs through envy and other vices. Subsequently, the conduct of the strong Jeevs themselves becomes corrupted and destroyed by tamasic, destructive, conduct through sectarian strife. Just as worldly discipline does not prevail at all in a jungle inhabited by animals like the tiger and lion, which have no trace of JeevakaRunya, it must be understood that worldly discipline will not prevail at all where humans without JeevakaRunya reside. Heavenly discipline also prevails through JeevakaRunya. If it is absent, heavenly discipline will not flourish. When JeevakaRunya is absent, the manifestation of grace does not appear. When that does not appear, the state of God is not attained. When that is not attained, no one will attain the bliss of liberation. If it is not attained, heavenly discipline will not flourish at all. The increase of evil. Because JeevakaRunya is not widely practiced, evil births are increasing, and evil forms of conduct are prevailing significantly. All the sinful Jeevs who lacked JeevakaRunya in their previous body are born, according to their sinful deeds, as denizens of hell, sea dwellers, forest dwellers, vicious animals like the tiger, bear, lion, yali, elephant, goat, boar, dog, and cat, vile birds like the crow and vulture, wicked creatures like the snake and scorpion, hard-skinned creatures like the crocodile and shark, impure plants like eddy, strychnine tree, and kali, cactus/euphorbia. Therefore, it must be understood that evil conduct is prevailing significantly. JeevakaRunya. JeevakaRunya is not only the chief means to obtain God's grace, but it must also be known that it is a fractional manifestation of that grace. Since JeevakaRunya is the inherent manifestation of the souls, the manifestation of God will not appear internally or externally in those Jeevs who lack this inherent manifestation. Objective of JeevakaRunya. The objective of JeevakaRunya must be known by understanding that all souls are naturally one and the common, rightful place for the grace knowledge, the intelligence of intelligence, to shine forth. For the souls to progress, elemental bodies are necessary. Without bodies, the soul's illumination would be obscured, the manifestation of grace would not appear, and ignorance would arise, which is the soul's bondage. Since elemental bodies are necessary, they are constantly subject to dangers such as hunger, killing, thirst, disease, danger, fear, lack, and desire from the illusions of Maya. Souls have been granted free will by grace to use their knowledge, aided by their faculties, to diligently strive to prevent these dangers and attain soul gain. The objective is that those who have the free will to alleviate the dangers listed above, that befall suffering Jeevs, must do so out of compassion. Hierarchy of compassion. Apara JeevakaRunya, lesser compassion, alleviating suffering from causes other than hunger and killing. This only creates a little worldly bliss. Para JeevakaRunya, supreme compassion, alleviating the suffering caused by hunger and killing. This grants all worldly pleasures, measureless miraculous pleasures, and eternal, imperishable bliss of liberation through grace. God has decreed that those who have the knowledge and freedom to alleviate these dangers in others but deceive and fail to do so will not attain the freedom to enjoy the bliss of liberation along with worldly bliss, and will even lose the freedom they currently enjoy. Therefore, the objective of JeevakaRunya is for those who possess the necessary knowledge and freedom to non-deceptively alleviate the dangers in those who lack the wisdom and freedom to do so themselves. Primacy of hunger and killing. If one asks, since alleviating dangers from all 8 causes, hunger, killing, thirst, disease, etc., is the objective of JeevakaRunya, why are only the dangers of hunger and killing highlighted as the supreme compassion? JeevakaRunya is of 2 types, Para JeevakaRunya and Apara JeevakaRunya. Para JeevakaRunya is the alleviation of hunger and killing. Apara JeevakaRunya is the alleviation of others. Therefore, Para JeevakaRunya is highlighted as special. Furthermore, those who are compassionate enough to alleviate the hunger of suffering Jeevs will not fail to give water to quench their thirst. Giving water is not difficult, and water is readily available in lakes, ponds, and canals. Ramalinga originally wrote the JeevakaRunya discipline in 7 parts. However, only the first 2 parts and this first half of the third are available to the world today. The remainder of the third part and the final 4 parts are unavailable.